I bought my parents a $425,000 seaside home for their 50th anniversary. I arrived to find my mother crying, my father trembling with packed suitcases, and my mother-in-law screaming, "This is our house, get out." I flew home from deployment to hand my mother a set of keys, and instead I found her crying on the porch of a house she no longer recognized as hers. My father sat trembling on the front steps, 2 suitcases packed and zipped beside him like he was waiting for a bus that wasn't coming. And my mother-in-law Brenda stood between them and the door with one finger jabbed toward my mother's chest, screaming loud enough that a neighbor 2 lots down had come out onto his own porch to watch. "This is our house. Get out." I set my duffel bag down in the driveway. I hadn't even taken my uniform off yet. I'd come straight from the airport, still in my ABUs, 22 hours of travel behind me, and a small velvet box of keys in my jacket pocket that I'd been imagining handing my mother for 6 months. I stood there for a second, just looking at the scene, letting my brain catch up to what my eyes were telling it. Then I walked forward, and the yard went quiet the way a room goes quiet right before a verdict. I'm Serena Voss. I'm a major in the United States Army, 10 years of deployment pay behind me, and I had just bought my parents a $425,000 house on the Oregon coast as a 50th anniversary gift. The deed had my name on it, only my name. I was about to find out that hadn't stopped anyone. I'd been saving for this house quietly for almost a decade. The kind of saving you do in the background of a career that keeps moving you every 18 months. Deployment pay stacking up in an account I barely looked at, because looking at it too often made the distance from my parents feel heavier than it already was. My mother, Delia, had spent 50 years cleaning other people's houses for cash, on her knees scrubbing baseboards in homes twice this size, coming home smelling like other people's lemon polish, and never once complaining about it in front of me. My father, Walt, had worked the docks in Coos Bay for 31 years before his knees gave out, and the two of them had raised me in a rented duplex with a leak in the bathroom ceiling that never fully got fixed. They used to talk about the ocean the way other people talk about heaven, not a place they expected to get to, just a nice idea to have around. My mother used to say she wanted to fall asleep to the sound of the water, just once before she died. I remembered that. I'd been remembering it for years, actually, filing it away every time she said it at Christmas. A soft little wish she never expected anyone to actually grant, so I granted it. A 3-bedroom house on a bluff outside Bandon, close enough to hear the waves at night, far enough back to be safe from the surge. I put the deed in my name only, not because I didn't trust my parents, but because my judge advocate friend, Captain Inez Farrow, had walked me through exactly why. Keeping the title solely in my name protected the property from any future complications, any creditor issues, any messy family disputes that might arise if it were held jointly. I remember laughing when she said messy family disputes. I thought she meant something abstract. I didn't think she meant my own in-laws. I married my husband Kyle 11 years ago, back when I was a captain and he was finishing his MBA, and I'd always known his family ran a little differently than mine. Louder, more entitled, the kind of family that assumed things belonged to them by proximity rather than by paperwork. His mother, Brenda, had never once in 11 years asked me a single question about my career that wasn't really a question about when I was going to quit it. His brother, Dustin, had spent most of his adult life bouncing between half-finished business ventures, each one funded by someone else's money, and abandoned the moment it required real work. I'd learned to keep my distance from both of them, politely, the way you keep distance from weather you can't control, but can at least dress for. I hadn't planned on giving them a key to my parents' house. I hadn't planned on giving them anything at all. The plan had been simple. I'd flown back 2 weeks before the actual anniversary party to surprise my parents early, hand them the keys myself, watch my mother's face when she understood the ocean sound she'd wished for at every Christmas dinner for a decade was now going to be the sound she woke up to every single morning. Instead, I stood in the driveway of my own house looking at numbers screwed onto the bedroom doors. I walked past Brenda without acknowledging her yet. I needed to see the whole picture before I said a single word. 12 years of Army leadership training kicking in over the part of me that wanted to start screaming immediately. Room 1, Room 2, Room 3. A laminated check-in sign taped to the kitchen counter, the kind you'd see at a bed and breakfast, complete with a smiling cartoon lighthouse in the corner. A stack of folded white towels on the counter with a handwritten note. Fresh linens. Please leave used towels in the hamper by the door. The master bedroom, the one I'd specifically chosen for my parents because it caught the morning light off the water, had a keypad lockbox screwed into the doorframe, the kind you see outside vacation rentals for keyless check-in. My mother's reading glasses were still sitting on the nightstand, shoved to one side to make room for a printed guest folder listing local restaurants and a laminated card of house rules. I picked up her glasses and just held them for a second. The specific small violation of finding someone's personal object stranded in a space that had been reorganized around a stranger's convenience. My stomach dropped in a way that had nothing to do with jet lag. I found the welcome card next, laminated, propped against a bowl of decorative shells that weren't mine and had never been mine. Wi-Fi password. Checkout time, 11 a.m., recommended restaurants in Bandon. And near the bottom, in the same cheerful font as everything else, please do not enter the pool cottage. Owner's storage. The pool cottage was the small guest structure out back, the one I'd specifically told the realtor I wanted included in the sale because I'd pictured my father tinkering in it, building the little wooden birdhouses he used to make when I was a kid, back before his knees and his hands both started started shaking too much for careful work. They'd filed my parents under storage. My hands weren't shaking yet. They would be later. Right then, they just went very still. The particular stillness I associate with the moment before a briefing where I already know the news is bad, and I'm choosing exactly how much of my face to let show it. I told myself, walking back out to the porch, that there had to be an explanation that made this something other than what it looked like. 12 years of marriage into this family had taught me that Brenda's worst behavior usually came wrapped in a justification just plausible enough to make you doubt your own read on the situation. I wanted badly for there to be a version of this where my mother had misunderstood something, where this was temporary, where I hadn't just watched my mother-in-law scream at my mother on a porch I'd paid $425,000 for. There wasn't a version like that. I found that out over motel coffee the next morning, because Brenda hadn't let my parents stay in the house that first night. She told them, calmly, like she was doing them a favor, that the guests had the whole place booked, and it would be confusing for everyone if my parents were still around. My mother told me the rest in pieces, her hands wrapped around a paper cup she wasn't drinking from, the same posture she used to have scrubbing someone else's floor. Small, contained, apologetic for taking up space, even in a story about her own home being taken from her. Brenda had banned her from the kitchen within the first week, telling her she'd confuse the guests if she was in there cooking her own meals at the wrong times. My father's wind chimes, the ones he'd hung with his own shaking hands the day they moved in, the specific sound my mother had wished for at every holiday dinner for 10 years, had been taken down after a paying stranger complained about the noise disturbing their sleep. My father had wrapped them carefully in a dish towel and hidden them in a hall closet so he wouldn't be a bother in the house his own daughter had bought him. That detail was the one that finally cracked something open in my chest. Not the check-in sign, not the numbered doors. My 68-year-old father hiding his own wind chimes so he wouldn't inconvenience the strangers occupying his house, apologizing with his hands for existing in a place I'd spent a decade of deployments earning the money for. I didn't cry in that motel room. I've learned, over 12 years of service, exactly how to set crying aside until it's tactically useful or fully safe, whichever comes first. I finished my coffee and I called a lawyer. I didn't cry in that motel room. I've learned over 12 years of service exactly how to set crying aside until it's tactically useful or fully safe, whichever comes first. I finished my coffee, and before I called a lawyer, I tried the thing I now recognize as the last gasp of hoping this could be resolved like a normal family disagreement. I called Brenda directly. "Serena," she said, warm as anything, like the last 12 hours hadn't happened. "I was hoping you'd call. We really need to talk about the arrangement before you go stirring things up." "There is no arrangement, Brenda. My name is the only one on that deed." "Well, technically," she said, and I could hear her shifting into the tone she used for family meetings, the one designed to make you feel like you were the unreasonable one for noticing a problem. "Dustin's been managing it as a rental for months now, covering the property taxes, the maintenance, things your parents were never going to be able to handle on a fixed income. We were helping. You'd know that if you were around more." I sat with that sentence for a second. If you were around more, delivered by a woman who had never once asked me a real question about the deployments that paid for the house she was currently defending her right to rent out. I told her, as calmly as I could manage, that my parents needed to be back in that house by end of day, with full access, no numbered doors, no check-in sign, no guests. "That's not really up to you alone," Brenda said. "This is a family home now." I hung up. That was the moment I stopped trying to fix this with a phone call and called a lawyer instead. Paula Reyes had handled 2 other legal matters for military families I knew, and she picked up on the second ring even though it was barely 7 a.m. I explained everything. The deed, the numbered doors, the welcome card, my parents in a motel while paying guests slept in the beds I'd bought. "First thing," Paula said, and I could hear her already typing while she talked, "do not go back there and start throwing people out physically. I know exactly what you want to do right now, and I need you not to do it. They're squatting in my parents' house, Paula. They're squatting in your house," she corrected, gently but precisely, the way lawyers correct you when the distinction actually matters. "And under Oregon law, anyone who's been occupying a residence for over 30 days, even without a lease, even as an unauthorized guest, gets certain tenancy protections before you can remove them. If you go in there and physically eject people, change the locks yourself, shut off utilities, anything like that, you could be looking at an unlawful eviction claim against you. Do it wrong, and this stops being about them. It becomes about you." I sat with that for a second. The particular frustration of being handed a legal reality that ran directly against every instinct 12 years of command experience had trained into me. I don't wait for permission slips well. Paula clearly understood that about me within the first 5 minutes of the call, because she moved fast to give me something to actually do instead of something to sit on. "We're going to do this clean," she said. 3 fronts running at the same time. 1, I file an eviction action in circuit court today, formally, on the record, naming you as sole title holder. 2, I'm calling county code enforcement. Running a short-term rental out of a residential property without a permit is a code violation in that county, and once they're notified, they move fast, because unpermitted STRs are exactly the kind of thing they get complaints about from neighbors. 3, whatever booking platform they're using, find out which one, gets a formal ownership complaint with your deed attached. Platforms pull listings fast when the person collecting the money isn't the person who owns the property. That's not a gray area for them. That's liability. "How long?" I asked. "Depends on the platform platform and the county, Paula said, but I'd guess we can have real pressure on all three fronts within a week. Is there a date that matters to you? Something that would make this land harder? I thought about it for exactly 2 seconds. Saturday, I said. The anniversary party. Every relative on both sides of the family is going to be in that yard at the same time. There was a pause on the line, and then something that might have been the beginning of a laugh. Then Saturday's our target, Paula said. Let's build toward it. The week that followed felt like running 3 separate briefings at once, each with its own timeline, its own points of failure, its own way of falling apart if I moved too fast or too slow. I found the booking platform listing myself on the second night, scrolling through my mother's phone because she'd taken a photo of the welcome card out of some instinct to document what was happening to her, even before she understood why that instinct mattered. The listing was on a mid-size vacation rental platform, posted under an account with Dustin's name attached, photos of my parents' living room staged with throw pillows that weren't theirs, a 5-star review from a Carol M. praising the peaceful coastal getaway and the attentive hosts. I submitted the ownership complaint myself that night, deed attached. Timestamp 11:52 p.m., 3 hours after landing on a red-eye from base. My hands were steady typing it. They started shaking afterward in the motel bathroom, once the adrenaline had nothing left to hold up. Paula filed the eviction action the next morning in circuit court. Formal complaint, my name on the caption as plaintiff. Kyle's family named as unauthorized occupants. She warned me the court timeline alone would likely run past Saturday. Eviction proceedings in Oregon typically take longer than a week, even on an expedited track, but the filing itself, the fact that it existed on the public record, was a lever we could use regardless of how fast the actual removal happened. She explained the specific reason we needed all three fronts running at once, rather than waiting on any single one. The court filing alone could take weeks to resolve if contested. The code complaint moved on its own regulatory timeline outside anyone's control, and the platform takedown was the only lever fast enough to actually matter by Saturday. But it only worked if the platform believed the ownership dispute was real and documented, not a family squabble dressed up as a legal claim. Redundancy, Paula said, when I asked why we needed all three instead of picking the fastest one. Any one of these on its own, they could stall, argue, drag out. 3 at once, moving independently, closing off in different directions. That's how you make sure there's no exit left uncovered by Saturday. The code enforcement complaint moved faster than either of us expected. A county inspector named Raymond Okafor, 17 years with the county's compliance division, called me back within 48 hours to confirm they'd already received 2 prior noise complaints from neighbors about the property. Complaints that had gone nowhere because the county had no idea an unpermitted short-term rental was operating there, and had assumed, reasonably, that it was just a busy family home. Once Raymond had my deed on file and understood the ownership question, the county moved with the specific urgency of a bureaucracy that doesn't like being made to look slow. We'll have a cease and desist prepared by Friday, Raymond told me. Taped to the door if nobody answers it. That's standard procedure for an active, unpermitted rental. Friday, 1 day before the party. Quick pause. If you want more stories like this in better quality, my Spotify's linked in the description. I told myself it was enough. I told myself that a lot that week, the way you tell yourself things when you need them to be true faster than reality, is actually willing to move. My mother called me twice from the motel, quiet, not asking for updates, just wanting to hear my voice, and both times I told her the same thing. It's being handled, Mom. Trust me on this one. She'd trusted me on the house in the first place. I wasn't going to let that trust be the thing that broke. Brenda spent those same days on the phone doing what Brenda has always done best, building a story before anyone else could build a truer one. I heard about it secondhand, from Kyle's aunt on his father's side, a woman named Colleen who'd always been kinder to me than the rest of that family, and who called me, hesitant, to ask if it was true that I'd kicked Brenda out of her own home. It's not her home, Colleen, I said. It's mine. My name's on the deed. I bought it for my parents. Colleen went quiet for a second. That's not the story going around. I wasn't surprised. Brenda had spent 2 days working the phones, painting herself as the wronged party. Poor Brenda, evicted by her cold military daughter-in-law, too busy chasing rank to understand what family actually meant. I heard fragments of it from 3 different relatives over those days, each version slightly different, each one somehow making Brenda more sympathetic and me colder. I didn't defend myself. I want to be honest about how hard that was, because everything in me wanted to call every single one of those relatives and read them the deed number over the phone. But Paula had told me something on our first call that stuck with me the whole week. Anyone who wants proof badly enough will come looking for it. Anyone who just wants a story to repeat at dinner isn't going to be convinced by a phone call anyway. Save your evidence for the room where it'll actually matter. So instead, when people texted me, cousins, an uncle on my mother's side, even Kyle himself caught somewhere between his mother and his wife and clearly wishing he could avoid the whole thing, I wrote back the same line every time. Come Saturday. Bring your own eyes. Kyle, for what it's worth, didn't take his mother's side outright. He also didn't take mine, not clearly, not in writing, which told me almost everything I needed to know about where that marriage was actually standing by the end of that week, separate from whatever happened with the house. I filed that thought away too. There'd be time for it later. Friday afternoon, the county taped the cease and desist to the front door. I wasn't there to see it. I was 2 hours away picking my parents up new clothes for the party, since most of theirs were still packed in those 2 suitcases from the porch. But Dustin sent Kyle a panicked photo of the notice within the hour, and Kyle forwarded it to me without comment, which was its own kind of comment. That same same afternoon, the booking platform pulled the listing entirely and froze the payout account. I got a confirmation email from their trust and safety team at 4:12 p.m., citing verified ownership discrepancy as the reason, and a note that any pending guest payments would be held pending review. I read that email standing in a Target parking lot holding a bag of my mother's new shoes, and I felt something in my chest unclench for the first time in 5 days. Dustin, I'd learn later, had already spent most of the projected income in his head, booked out nearly every weekend through the fall, at $280 a night. Numbers he'd apparently been showing off to friends as evidence his newest venture was finally the one that worked. He watched his calendar cancel one booking at a time on his phone that afternoon, refund after refund, draining an account balance he'd never actually had the right to build in the first place. Saturday came up bright and windy, the kind of coastal morning my mother used to describe when she talked about the ocean, sharp light, salt in the air, gulls circling over the bluff. I hadn't slept more than 3 hours. I remember standing in the motel bathroom at 6 a.m., pressing my dress uniform flat with my hands because the iron hadn't worked, running through Paula's 3 fronts in my head one more time like a pre-mission checklist. Deed, filing, cease and desist, takedown confirmation, making sure every document was printed, every page in order, nothing left to chance on a day where I wouldn't get a second attempt if something went wrong. 50 people showed up to the yard in folding chairs, someone's potato salad sweating on a card table, balloons Brenda had apparently ordered herself, tied to the porch railing like she was hosting a party she had no legal right to host. She played hostess at my own front door, greeting relatives with hugs, gesturing people toward the yard like she owned every square foot of it. The county's cease and desist notice was still taped to the door 6 feet behind her, and she'd angled the welcome table so nobody had to look directly at it. I watched 3 separate relatives glance at it, then look away. The specific social discomfort of people who've noticed something wrong and decided not to be the one who says so out loud. I wasn't going to make them say it. I was going to make sure they didn't have to. I arrived in uniform, not for theater. I'd come straight from a follow-up appointment at the VA clinic on base and hadn't had time to change. But I noticed, walking into that yard, exactly what the uniform did to the room. Conversations paused. A few relatives straightened up out of old habit. Brenda's smile when she spotted me crossing the lawn tightened at the corners in a way I recognized from 11 years of watching her perform composure she didn't actually feel. She got the first word in, loud enough for the whole yard to hear, the way she always did. Is the major here to ruin her own parents' party? A few people laughed, uncertain, testing the room to see which way it was going to break. I didn't answer her right away. I set my water glass down on the table beside the potato salad, and I reached into the folder I'd been carrying since the car, and I laid the documents flat, one at a time, in full view of everyone standing close enough to see. The deed, my name printed clean across the top, the circuit court eviction filing, Paula's firm letterhead, case number stamped in the corner, the county's cease and desist notice, the same one taped to the door 6 feet away, the booking platform's takedown confirmation, printed that morning, verified ownership discrepancy, highlighted in yellow. I'm not going to make a scene, Brenda, I said, and my voice came out steadier than I expected it to, the same voice I use giving a briefing to people whose attention I need to hold without raising my volume. I don't need to. She looked down at the deed. I watched her read the name on it, really read it, for what might have been the first time, because I don't think it had ever occurred to her that the document existed outside of an abstraction she could argue her way around. Her smile slid off her face in stages, the way ice slides off a windshield once the defrost finally catches. This is my family's house, she said, louder now, a crack running through the volume. We made it work. We fixed the gutters. We furnished it. I put one finger on the deed, tapping it once, and I kept my voice level. There's one name on this title, I said. It isn't Kyle's. It isn't Voss. It's mine. Paula stepped forward then. She'd come as a guest, technically, but she'd also come as exactly what she was, and she confirmed the filing in plain, unhurried language for anyone in the yard still holding out hope. This was a family misunderstanding that would blow over by dessert. The eviction is filed and on the record in circuit court, she said. County code enforcement has an active cease and desist on this property for an unpermitted short-term rental. That's not a dispute. That's public record as of yesterday afternoon. That's when Carol stood up. I hadn't clocked her before Paula spoke. A woman in her 60s, sitting quietly on the porch steps in a sundress. Someone I'd assumed was a relative from Kyle's side I simply hadn't met yet. She stood up slowly, the particular hesitance of someone realizing, mid-party, that the story she'd been handed and the story actually happening were two very different things. I need to say something, Carol said, and the yard, already quiet, went quieter. I'm not family. I'm a guest. I paid $2,000 to stay in this house for 2 weeks, through the booking site, to a host named Dustin Voss. She looked around, visibly working up the nerve to keep going. I got an email yesterday saying my payment's been frozen because the property might not belong to the person who took my money. Dustin didn't say anything. I watched him go gray-faced in the middle of that yard, staring down at his phone, at what I'd later learn was a screen full of cancellation notices and refund demands stacking up faster than he could process them. Every version of the story he'd been prepared to tell, a family arrangement, a temporary favor, a misunderstanding blown out of proportion, evaporated the second Carol confirmed, out loud, in front of 50 witnesses, that actual money had changed hands for a house that was never his to rent. Brenda played her last card anyway, because women like Brenda always have one more work hard, even after the table's already been cleared. You were never one of us, she said, turning on me, her voice shaking now, somewhere between fury and the beginning of real fear. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Not anymore. The documents were already doing the work, laid flat on the table next to the potato salad, plain enough that anyone in that yard could walk over and read them for themselves. You're right, I said. I'm not one of you. I'm the one who owns the door. The party didn't end the way Brenda had planned it, and it didn't end the way I'd fully expected either. Some of the relatives left within the hour, quietly, the way people leave when they've realized they clapped for the wrong side of an argument and don't know how to walk it back gracefully. Others stayed, my parents' actual friends mostly, the ones who'd known Delia and Walt for 30 years and had shown up to celebrate them, not to watch a hosting scheme collapse in real time. Someone refilled the potato salad bowl. Someone else put music back on. My mother, still a little stunned, ended up laughing for the first time in a week, standing barefoot in grass that belonged to her, finally, in every way that mattered. Dustin was gone within 20 minutes of Carol's confession, and I heard, weeks later, that the booking platform's fraud review had escalated into something with actual teeth, a formal claim against him for operating a listing under false ownership representation, on top of the refunds he now owed every guest whose stay he'd already spent the money from. I don't know the full financial fallout. I know it wasn't small, and I know it wasn't quiet within his own circle, because apparently there'd been more than one house. A cousin's vacant rental up in Newport had gone through something similar the year before, quietly settled before anyone outside the family heard about it. Nobody had connected the pattern until Saturday made it impossible not to. Brenda didn't apologize that day. She didn't apologize the following month either, when Kyle finally had the conversation with her that he should have had a week earlier, the one where he told his mother, in front of me, that she wasn't welcome back on that property without an invitation. I watched something shift in Kyle that week too. Not enough, not fast enough, but something. We're still working out what that marriage actually looks like now that I've seen exactly how far his family will go, and exactly how long it took him to say a single word about it. I don't know yet how that part ends. I'm giving it the same honesty I'd give any operation with an uncertain outcome. Steady, clear-eyed, no illusions about how much work is still ahead. My parents moved in properly 2 weeks later. My father rehung the wind chimes himself on a Sunday afternoon, his hands still shaking the way they always do now, but steady enough for the task. He hung them from the same hook, in the same spot, and stood back to listen for a long time before he came inside. My mother says she can hear the ocean from the bedroom window at night, just like she used to imagine at every Christmas dinner for a decade, and she still, 6 months later, sometimes tears up describing the exact sound of it, like it's still hard to believe it's actually hers to fall asleep to. I redeployed once more since that Saturday, a shorter rotation this time, and I called my mother from a satellite phone the first night I was back on base, just to ask what she could hear outside her window. The water, she said, like it was the most ordinary thing in the world now, which is exactly what I'd wanted it to become for her. Ordinary, permanent, no longer a wish she had to make at holiday dinners.